a base on it. It's again, depending on what you read and what you don't read. What I have read, that it would have been no way, because even the submarines had a hard time, because Germany didn't have the technology on their submarines to go to Antarctica now and bring much of any supplies. Now, there was supposedly a weather base in Antarctica, which they surrendered after the war because they were stuck there. And we, brought them and took them out of the base they had there. But, again, I don't know, because, Linda Moulton Howe talks about this massive underground base in Antarctica, but it is not man-made. It's something, like from aliens. It created it.
Yeah, I seen that interview, and you're right. The guy that was top secret, top clearance military was in disguise and all that, but that's what they described. It was underground. It was kind of illuminated metal, and it was big, and you walked into it and had, writing on the walls and stuff like that. And
the ceiling and stuff like that. And when you walked in there was actually writing on the walls, which, I don't have the foggiest idea. And Linda Moulton Howe didn't know what it said, but there was definitely writing, things you could touch, and it would do certain things. I do think, that something is going on. And go ahead.
I was going to say, along with that story, before that, there was they had a scientist that were there studying out on the ice somewhere. They disappeared for like a week. So the military sent a plane out to find them. And while they were landing there was no sight of them. They come running from somewhere, and they got in the planes. They wouldn't talk or nothing, say anything. They were like shell shocked, and they were missing for a week. It's thought of that they ran into this base down in the aliens there. And also the military told the pilots not to fly over this certain area. Like they had to go around, but they didn't. They flew over it, and they got chewed out for it because there's obviously something there they didn't want them to see, or some kind of anomaly or something going on.
Yeah, we'll never know because we'll be lied to. So again, is it folklore, or is it something that really is going on and happening? Is something in Antarctica? Something's going on anyway, because Antarctica is not going to be Antarctica much longer. So if there is stuff hid there, it's not going to be able to be hid much longer.
That's a good point. 65 degrees. Another good question I kind of had was, he said that the Nazis have a base on the moon. Well, if that's the case, that means the aliens that are there must have let them have a base there, not us. Think about that.
Well, if that's the case, as you know how the Nazis treated people, right? Then, if there is an alien race that was working with the Nazis, right, giving them technology to build these starships and all this other stuff, tells me that these are terrible, terrible aliens that we don't want to meet.
I agree with you on that one. I do. There's strong evidence to kind of show that the Nazis also recovered one or two UFOs from crashes as well. I think one was in 1933 and another was in 1938.
I just don't think without help they could have back engineered anything, especially in the 30s and 40s. They had to have help. I'm sorry, but again. Even with the strongest microscope, looking at a transistor and then trying to duplicate it and figure out how it's composed of the materials and everything else and how it works, without the technology, the intelligence to back engineer it, even the smartest brains, I don't think they could do it. Even Bruce McAfee said the same thing. And I remember talking to my dad, who was an electronic engineer. He went to college for this. And he said, when I asked him questions about that, he goes, no way. No way could they, because there was even talk about Roswell back in the 70s and 60s. And he said the same thing. There's no way going back in the late 40s, early 50s, that they would have technology to back engineer it, let alone even the 70s. Seriously, if I went back to 1924 with a transistor radio or a laptop computer, you think they're going to be able to duplicate it?
No, and not only that, the materials from these alien artifacts, they're made on such a molecular level that we can't produce them. Like they'll have like so much of silver mixed with this that we don't have the technology to make that combination, to make this equipment to put together to make an overall thing to reverse engineer this stuff. In other words, we don't have the technology to build the technology to build it.
Yeah, let alone LCD screen. Okay, to develop the LCD screen again, even that we wouldn't have the technology or the material to do it, let alone come up with it and figure out how to make it. That I do think something did happen. I think we have been given help because to me, like I said, I did a lot of research on aircraft. End of the war, the Germans were developing these jets, but they were fire bombs. In other words, to take off or land, it was pretty much suicidal because they would explode. They had no landing gear. They had a little wheels underneath it. When the plane took off, the wheels, stayed on the ground. When they came back, they belly, slid in. But the fumes from the jet fuel a lot of times would ignite these things and the pilots would burn alive. Now, here, 6 months after World War II ends, we're developing jets with pressurized cockpits, developing jets, twin-engine jets, single-engine jets, complete. If you look how the German jets were styled, to look at what we were producing in the late 40s. You know what a B-47 looks like? It kind of looks like a B-52 minus the bubble cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We jumped in that short a period of time to producing a B-47 and then the B-52. I mean, technology and all the different fighters they were experimenting with, even the X-15 and all this stuff, it doesn't make logical sense how fast it was developed. You trying to tell me after World War II was over, 6 months later, we were designing jets that were far superior than what the Germans had? Far superior. We actually had flying jets, that were capable of taking off and landing and not exploding, doing 500 and some miles an hour.
Right. And then from like 48 to 52 in that little span, we went from, from the tubes to integrated circuits. And
no, integrated circuits didn't. Okay. Transistors started in probably about 60. And
60, okay.
Yeah, and then in the late 60s, integrated circuits, but they weren't little teeny circuits like they were now. Integrated circuits were like 1.5 inches long by 1/2 inch wide, and it took a whole bunch of them to make a circuit, to make it work.
Yeah.
Then, then like 10 years later, something that you'd have to look at with a magnifying glass would do everything that would take massive tubes to do, or massive transistors could do on something the size of a grain of sand or smaller. Technology really advanced crazy.
That's a jump. That's a big jump there.
Fiber optics, same thing. One day we didn't have it, the next thing, fiber optics. I used to play around with it. My dad would come home and he was working on fiber optics. And I look at it, to me, it looked like a whole bunch of like little plastic hairs coming off of a light base. But each one of those hairs would be equal to like a whole bunch of like phone lines, for example, or a whole bunch of stuff. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing. When you can put up that much technology that you had in, like, say, something the size of a microwave and get it into the size of something like a bead of sand, that is when you're getting out there and getting really advanced. Oh,
like the guy the other day said, in the 50s, okay, the government was, doing all this the computers in the 50s, you realize they had to have a lady sit on a machine like a typewriter, and she would type into it, and it would punch little squares on this cardboard thing that they would insert into the computer, which then had feelers in it, and then it would, tell it, numbers. Okay?
Yeah.
You trying to tell me they had graphics capability to... Oh, come on. Computer technology, honestly, I used to design computers back in the 80s. And I can tell you this. In the 70s, the computers didn't have the technology for graphics. No way. Government computers, any computers, didn't have the graphic capability to simulate Earth and all this graphics that we have today, what you see on... They're just getting it to it on movies, where they're able to do all this stuff. It would never happened in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s or even into the 80s. So if whoever preaches that is talking to people very naive, I'm going to tell you that right now.
Yeah. Perfect example, the computer that sent us to the moon was about the size of my house, and now today it's the size we call it a smartphone. So
no. Even the ones that was on the capsules going to the moon, your phone computer in it would blow it away. Right. With the capabilities. The original, like the PET Commodore, it came out. Put it this way, had more intelligence than what was in anything that NASA had in that time frame. Tells you hogwash with a lot of this stuff. Anyway, tomorrow, who's our guest?
Tomorrow, our guest is Dave Spinks, and he's going to be good. He's got amazing stories with spirits, Bigfoot stories.
Yeah, we're going to talk about his Bigfoot too.
Yeah, Mothman. He's got. I'll tell you, I've seen a story on TV about the Bigfoot. That's amazing.
Well, till tomorrow, James, like always, have a good evening. Go eat a bowl of that cereal. It has frosted stuff on it, okay?
I think I will.
Okay. You take care, my friend.
Yep.